This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. Efforts to find out the truth about corruption inside HUD hit a stone wall today. Former Housing and Urban Development Secretary Sam Pierce took the fifth. He invoked his constitutional rights against self-incrimination and again refused to tell congressional investigators what he knows about mismanagement and corruption and how well-connected political campaign contributors and others made big money off housing programs meant for the poor. Doubts are now being raised in Washington about who, if indeed anyone, ever will be held accountable for what happened at HUD during the Reagan-Bush administration. Reporter Linda Tyra begins our coverage.
The standoff between former HUD Secretary Sam Pierce and the House committee looking into political influence peddling at the department continued today, and the committee blinked. For the second time, Pierce invoked the Fifth Amendment, refused to answer questions, and warned he'll never testify in what he termed an accusatory atmosphere. At today's hearing, the chairman argued that the former secretary could no longer complain, as he did last month, that he was unprepared to testify.
But he has had more than ample time. During the past 2 months, Mr. Pierce has had more attorneys working on his behalf than the entire cast of LA Law.
In a session closed to cameras at his request, Pierce refused to explain contradictions between himself and his own aides about his role in approving funds for a troubled North Carolina housing project backed by Pierce's former law partner. But Pierce did say, "I committed no illegal or wrongful acts." The committee refuses to grant Pierce immunity to get him to talk. So frustrated members now believe as long as the former HUD secretary and his top aides refuse to testify, even under subpoena, the committee has hit a stone wall.
One thing is clear, that if we're going to get to the bottom of this, that justice will have to appoint an independent counsel.
By refusing to testify, the former HUD officials have avoided possible perjury charges. And so far, the Justice Department has shown no indication of opening a criminal probe of Pierce or any high-ranking HUD official. Linda Tyra, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
You solemnly swear to tell the truth?
For months, a parade of influence peddlers has come before Congress with stories of get-rich schemes and political deals. But while the HUD scandal played to a crowded hearing room in the nation's capital, it was being played out in small-town America, in towns like Brookhaven, Long Island, where HUD dollars enriched a well-connected few at the expense of the poor.
The system is really messed up to me. I feel the system is really, you know, everybody's crooked. Seems like to me everybody's crooked. They don't care what happens to the poor.
Michelle Kelly and a dozen other single mothers in Brookhaven pay high rents for dilapidated housing.
The floor has a hole in it.
But it wasn't supposed to be that way here. These are HUD houses, and according to HUD rules, the once abandoned houses were to be sold to low-income families who agreed to renovate them and live in them for at least 3 years. The price, just $500. But of 18 sold, 14 homes wound up not with low-income families, but in the hands of well-known real estate speculators.
He bought this house for $500. He's renting it to me for $850. I mean, he's making a killing per month. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. He's getting back more than what he paid for it, even more than what he put into it.
No one from HUD or the town of Brookhaven ever came to check on the houses, so the alleged fraud went undetected for years. It was a tip to county authorities that finally revealed the houses were owned by the wrong people.
When authorities finally charged the property owners, tenants might have expected some relief. Instead, they were told they'd have to pay the same amount of rent to their new landlord, the town of Brookhaven.
Until the charges are sorted out, the town claims the rents must stay as they are.
Town says sign this paper, landlord says sign this paper. You know, either way I'm going to be out in the street.
The house was turned directly over from HUD to them.
The tenants have organized and are trying to fend for themselves. They aren't sure who's to blame the most. But Brookhaven's attorney admits insiders in the town's government had to have participated in the fraud. That's why they're now investigating hundreds of other HUD houses in Brookhaven.
Based upon the town's experience, I would have to say that if I were in another community, I would be taking a long, hard look at any housing program designed for low to moderate income residents.
So where was HUD? They didn't investigate and say, these don't match our guidelines, there must be something wrong.
Most of the benefit has gone to the housing industry, Relatively little has gone to housing consumers in general, and very little has gone to the poorest.
For now, Washington insiders worry about criminal charges, and HUD worries about a loss of face. But for each of these women, the loss could be the roof over her head. Christine Negroni, CBS News, Brookhaven, Long Island.
President Bush vetoed another abortion funding measure today. This one would have paid for some abortions for poor women in Washington, D.C. as part of that city's $4 billion federal budget. The president recently vetoed another bill that would have helped poor women nationwide to obtain abortions in cases of rape or incest. The president and other Western Hemisphere leaders gathered today in Costa Rica, the Central American nation marking 100 years of democracy. As Mr. Bush arrived in San Jose, he said he sees a chance to create the world's first completely democratic hemisphere. With the two-day high meeting expected to be mostly talk, ceremony, and photographs, correspondent Leslie Stahl reports a presidential feud is getting most of the attention.
Costa Rican President Oscar Arias called this summit to celebrate democracy in Latin America. As a U.S. official said, 10 years ago, the Democrats were 3 or 4 lonely guys in the sea of military dictators. Today, President Bush was one of 17 elected leaders from the region. But among those invited, Daniel Ortega of Nicaragua. Next to Manuel Noriega, Mr. Bush's main adversary in Latin America, causing some to fear that the focus would not be on democracy, but on whether George Bush speaks to or snubs the Sandinista.
Well, you all are looking for some kind of fight. I'm here to celebrate the
The president has refused to sign any document that includes Ortega, so there'll be no final communique here.
I want to see Nicaragua become a democratic country, and I don't want to see him swimming against the tide of democracy that is sweeping this hemisphere.
And the president embraced Violeta Chamorro, whom he's backing in the Nicaraguan election against Ortega. Mr. Bush is playing in part to conservatives back home, who worry his mere presence here lends legitimacy to Ortega.
It is really very wrong of Arias to have invited Ortega. He's excluding people who are not Democrats, Pinochet in Chile, the Haitian, fine, but then you exclude Ortega as well.
Conservatives further charge that this conference puts the final nail in the coffin of the Nicaraguan country.
The Bush administration changed its policy completely, and it has abandoned us.
There was applause today when Arias called the uninvited Noriega of Panama a tyrant and when he criticized Ortega. With little substance expected from this summit, some of the leaders concede it's just one big photo op with one big question. Did Mr. Bush shake hands with Ortega? Well, the answer is yes, but there were no cameras in sight. Leslie Stahl, CBS News, San Jose, Costa Rica.
In Colombia, one of the deadliest attacks yet being blamed on that country's drug and violence criminals. A bomb attack on a police bus in Medellin overnight killed 5 officers and wounded 16 others. Medellin is the headquarters city for one of the world's biggest drug thug outfits. As for the Colombian drugs still pouring into the United States, CBS News Defense Department correspondent David Martin reports tonight the U.S. military is now building up forces trying to choke off the cocaine smuggling pipeline up to the Caribbean.
Every day this month, an AWACS radar plane has taken off from the U.S. and flown out over the Caribbean. Its mission? Detect small planes flying cocaine out of Colombia. These AWACS planes used to be based in Saudi Arabia, but they have been quietly withdrawn and are now joining the war against drugs full-time. It is the start of a so far unannounced American military buildup in the Caribbean under the command of this man.
We want to put our effort as close to the source as we can. My thrust is going to be is to get good intelligence and then have forces available to react to that intelligence almost immediately.
Since October 1st, U.S. fighter planes have been positioned at bases throughout the Caribbean, ready to scramble and check out at close range any suspicious planes the AWACS picks up coming out of Colombia. A new and different mission for the military.
They, of course, are designed and are used to working against a very high-speed supersonic targets normally, and now to ask them to operate against something that's going 200 knots is maybe a little more difficult problem for them
To stop and search vessels suspected of carrying drugs, the Navy has drawn up plans to station 8 to 10 warships full-time in the Caribbean, including an amphibious ship equipped with helicopters. One option, position them across choke points between Colombia and the southeastern U.S. Another option, station an aircraft carrier off the coast of Colombia on at least a part-time basis.
The military buildup will almost certainly produce results in the form of drugs seized and smugglers arrested. But no one knows whether it will actually slow down the flow of cocaine or simply force the drug lords to find other routes to the U.S. David Martin, CBS News, Miami.
And still to come on the CBS Evening News, David Culhane on the torching of a jam-packed Pennsylvania prison, and Betsy Aaron on protest and prayer after a horrifying big city street crime.
If you thought you had to give up comfort to get a close shave, Norelco says, think again. Their revolutionary shaving system shaves skin close in a way that's incredibly comfortable. As the hair enters the chamber, the patented lift and cut system lifts each hair and holds it a split second before a blade cuts it, so it's possible to shave skin close without the blades even touching the skin. The lift and cut shaving system from Norelco. We made close comfortable.
Kmart presents At Home with Martha Stewart.
Sometimes it seems like no matter what the size of the job, the mess you're left with when you're finished is even bigger. That's why I keep this powerful Hoover Elite Upright Cleaner around. It has brushed edge cleaning on both sides and a large, easy-to-change bag. It's even lightweight, so it doesn't take a lot of effort to do a lot of cleaning up.
Make your house a home with a Hoover Elite Upright from Kmart.
Oh, not today. I can't have this arthritis pain today. Anacin.
The Anacin formula gives you more medicine than regular aspirin for hours of relief from minor arthritis pain. Anacin, when relief is a must.
How fast does Dristan nasal spray start to work?
Faster than a teenager can answer the phone.
Dristan works fast to relieve nasal congestion, even sinus pressure. For relief,
Faster than tumbleweed in a tornado.
Dristan nasal spray. It's faster than...
Quote, last night was a riot, tonight was a war. Those words from a Pennsylvania prison guard this morning after police stormed the overcrowded facility with gunfire and tear gas. Authorities regained control from inmates who seized hostages and set fires, but only after 2 nights of struggle that left confusion about the number of rioters, injuries, and hostages. David Culhane has our report.
A second night of violent and fiery rioting left 76 people injured and a dozen buildings destroyed. Several firefighters were overcome by fumes. Inmates seized 5 hostages, but all of them were released or rescued safely. 2 prisoners were shot and wounded, and 1 guard was stabbed repeatedly. Many others were beaten.
Well, I was running a part of the jail when it was just totally overrun with inmates, people beating you, kicking you, whatever they can do to you.
There were festering grievances here among the 2,600 inmates, especially about a new food policy.
We have family day picnics twice a year, and we're allowed to bring food in. And they just stopped the family day picnics. They said we could have family day picnics if we ate from the machine.
Perhaps even more important is the fact that Camp Hill and the entire Pennsylvania prison system are severely crowded, almost 50% over capacity.
When you have an overcrowded, large institution full of prison inmates, you're really subject to any little thing going awry, setting it off.
Officials said there was so much damage here that 900 inmates will have to be moved to other institutions around the state, leaving Pennsylvania's prisons even more ominously crowded. David Culhane, CBS News, Harrisburg.
Federal agents in 5 states arrested more than 60 members of the El Rukns gang today. Authorities used sledgehammers to get inside the gang's headquarters in Chicago, said to be a center for drug trafficking operations. Officials say they will demolish the Chicago gang's headquarters and build a playground.
This year, one airline will pass all the others. We'll have 70,000 more departures than Delta. We'll have 120,000 more departures than American. We'll have 400,000 more departures than United. In fact, this year, U.S. Air will have more departures than any other airline in the free world. So if we sound like an airline that's really taking off, you don't know how right you are. U.S. Air, America's most frequent flyer.
It's happening now. The Crab Lovers Festival at Red Lobster. King crab from icy Arctic waters, steaming, succulent. Delicate snow crab to dip, drip, and savor. And now get your taste of our sweet, meaty Pacific Dungeness. We've created 8 crab and seafood combinations starting at just $6.95. It all ends November 19th at Red Lobster. Friday through Sunday, try our crab and shrimp special, just $10.95.
There's a sharp shooting pain up the side of my head. My head feels like it's exploding. I usually use aspirin.
Today, Bunny Summer is trying extra-strength Tylenol gel caps. For pain like hers, why take aspirin or ibuprofen when nothing works better than Tylenol gel caps?
These gel caps made my headache and the sharp shooting pain just disappear. I don't plan to take aspirin anymore. I plan to use these Tylenol gel caps.
Extra-strength gel caps, only from Tylenol. For everyday pain, nothing works better.
Warsaw Pact foreign ministers wrapped up their meeting in Poland today with a historic communique. It declares the right of each member nation to decide its own fate, free from outside interference. This, in effect, ends the Brezhnev Doctrine, which ensured Soviet domination of Eastern Europe and led to the 1968 invasion of Czechoslovakia. In East Germany today, the communist government declared an amnesty for hundreds of thousands of freedom seekers. It applies to pro-democracy demonstrators, people who left East Germany illegally, and all those caught trying to escape since the Berlin Wall went up in 1961. The nearly 2-year-old battle between Israeli troops and Arab protesters in Israeli-occupied territories has been fought mostly with bullets and stones. But they are not the only weapons. In one West Bank village, the weapon of choice is a tax strike. And correspondent Bob Simon reports the Israelis are trying to crush it.
A procession of patriarchs left Jerusalem today to pray in Beit Sahur, a town just down the hill from Bethlehem, where shepherds once saw a star heralding the birth of Jesus. The bishops never got there. The army stopped them, as the army has stopped everyone, journalists, diplomats, politicians, from going to Beit Sahur for the last 5 weeks. The town of 12,000 has been shrouded in mystery, surrounded by roadblocks, its phone lines cut.
Want to go to Beit Sahur? Beit Sahur is under construction.
What's happening inside Beit Sahur is only suggested by the silence, the empty streets, the watchful and suspicious eyes. What's happening here is a quiet and fierce test of wills, a struggle between the power of the state and the passive resistance of people who borrowed their battle cry from the American Revolution. No taxation without representation.
If it is our government, okay, we will pay, but it is not our government, so we will not pay.
The people of Beit Sahur stopped paying their taxes to the Israeli authorities, saying they would no longer finance their own occupation. The Israelis retaliated with moving vans. Accompanied by soldiers, the taxman's been coming every day to take things away. Cars, furniture, appliances, machinery, merchandise. These pictures taken with a home video camera show how Beit Sahur has become a town of bare floors and empty stores, grocery shops with no food, pharmacies with no medicine.
I don't throw stones. We don't do anything wrong, but no representation, no taxation.
The authorities stripped Shakib Awad's sheet metal shop, put him out of business. Awad says most of Beit Sahur is out of business now, that the Israelis have confiscated materiel worth close to $2 million.
I am very happy, really very happy.
Why?
Why I am now making resistance against the occupation.
Beit Sahur was an unlikely candidate for resistance of any kind, a prosperous town, a Christian town, middle-class businessmen with a lot to lose. What the Israelis are afraid of losing is the initiative. They've adopted a policy of no comment on Beit Sahur, but Defense Minister Rabin told Israel's parliament, we will break them, we'll teach them a lesson. What the people of Beit Sahur seem to be learning is that civil disobedience poses far deeper problems to the Israelis than riots or stones. Bob Simon, CBS News, Beit Sahur.
Terry Anderson turned 42 today. For the 5th straight year, the American journalist spent his birthday in the hands of pro-Iranian terrorists somewhere inside Lebanon. In Washington, a mass of hope was offered for Anderson. Family, friends, and colleagues of the Associated Press correspondent prayed for his release. And Anderson's hometown unveiled a statue to ensure that the longest held of 8 American hostages in Lebanon will not be forgotten. Unless we forget, the others are Thomas Sutherland, Frank Reed, Joseph Scipio, Edward Tracy, Robert Polhill, Alan Steen, and Jess Turner.